Evening, everybody. What's going on? It's Mike and Wendy, and we are in the Marriage Shop. Monday, a rainy Monday for a lot of you, snowy Monday for others. The weather's out of control. I need some sunshine and some dryness, like in the weather.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
sunshine and dryness is what you usually get in Texas, but apparently in Texas it's like 5 degrees, ice, snow, and unexpected weather. We have quite a few friends and family in Texas, so we are adding you all to our prayers. We've been having some power outages and different things that you wouldn't expect. You saw that there was a horrible vehicle accident the other day. So just keeping the whole country in our prayers at this time as we often do. So yeah, here I mean it's a little chilly but rainy for the most part. And you're giving the weather report.
I am.
Then you say,
Yeah, I said it was rainy and cold, and I was saying I wanted dryness.
okay. So so
Whatever.
welcome back. It's another week. We're in the marriage shop, and thankful to have an opportunity to share with you once again. So it was Valentine's Day yesterday, and I saw from most of your posts that a lot of you had fun doing some things that you love with people that you love. So we're glad that you were able to dedicate some time specifically for that purpose.
Yeah. And we talked a lot about it last week.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, if you caught us last week and you were able to kind of take any of that in, if you got caught slipping on this past weekend, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Except I don't know, try again. Maybe there's a birthday or something coming up. But I don't know. I think we had a good time this weekend. We kind of made a whole weekend of it. It's like a date night Friday, continued to date into Saturday, chilled a little bit on Saturday afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
and the weather kind of lent itself to just sitting around yesterday after church, just like watching movies and kicking it with the fireplace on. That was amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Charlotte Bembry and Rella Hicks, thank you for joining us. Glad you could get back in here. We've been missing you both. And we're just excited that you're joining us tonight. So if you're joining us for the first time, or you think someone could benefit from just spending a little time with us in the marriage shop on Mondays at 7, we're Mike and Wendy, and we are talking about what tonight?
Tonight we are talking about gun ownership. And so I know some people are seeing that like, what? Gun ownership in the marriage shop?
Right.
Yeah. Why the marriage shop? Well, why not the marriage shop?
Mm-hmm.
Because um, gun ownership is becoming kind of a big deal. And I say it's been a big deal for a lot of people, especially in the U.S. United States, we have a very interesting relationship with the weapons, with firearms in particular.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons for that we won't get into tonight. Maybe that's another blog or a podcast or something. But um, you kind of get to a point where the decision is being made. Do we own guns? Do we not? What kind of gun owners are we? And even particularly in our community here lately, a lot of conversation around guns.
Yeah.
And in fact, I belong to a group on Facebook, and this picture pops up, and it was a father and his 3 daughters, and they're all strapped. Everybody has their firearm on their side, and they're taking a picture, and it's basically saying, this father, he was trying to make sure that his kids were all trained up in how to use weapons, and so they were asking for the feedback it's a men's group, and ask for the feedback from the men. Would you do this? Is this something that we need to be doing? Is that okay? And it really got me thinking a lot about this whole idea of guns, what it means in marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and what it means in general, but specifically how that plays out in marriage, especially given some of the things that I've seen over the years in terms of how that can play out.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, it's like, what are people thinking about that? Where are people these days on this whole idea of gun ownership? So
Mm.
so yeah, so that's really, I think, kind of the genesis of what really kind of brought on tonight's topic.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. It's been in the news a little bit lately.
Hmm.
Tanya Gibbons that sometimes joins us in the Marriage Shop. Actually, she does Tuesday talks with Tanya. Some of you in the local area, more than likely, if you're in the local area, you know her. And she put out an invitation a few weeks ago to women. For gun familiarization and firing range and some other things. There was a free class that was being offered, and put that out and had a few people respond to that.
Hmm.
And then, of course, we know in response to COVID and recent social unrest, gun sales and sales of ammunition have just kind of gone through the roof. Like if
Hmm.
you walk through the hunting section in different stores, as we have,
Hmm.
it's like scarce. Like
Yeah.
they ran a sale and there's nothing left.
It is yeah, typically, and it's very interesting, right? Because there's some people, when things change,
Hmm.
or when certain changes take place, they buy weapons and ammunition, right? And so now some folks, like during the holidays, birthdays, and that's just kind of a thing. It's what they do, right? But there, in terms of political change, when there's like political change or there's unrest or whatever politically, you'll see sales of guns and ammo go up. Now, my father did give me some insight, because my dad worked for, after he retired from Verizon, just for fun. He worked for Bass Pro for a long time, and now he's working for
Cabela's?
not Cabela's, Dick's
Oh,
Sporting
Dick's.
Goods,
Oh,
yeah, Field
okay.
and Stream. But depends on, I think it's the same folks.
Hmm.
But he said that one of the major ammo manufacturers actually had like dissolved and sold their company, and so that manufacturer is not producing ammunition. He said so part of the issue in terms of supply is that a major supplier pulled out of the market,
Okay.
and so that's part of the reason, because I'm like, dude, what's happening? Why are
They're
the
gonna
shelves
run.
why
Yeah.
are the shelves empty like that?
Yeah.
And so that's part of the issue, but it is true that there's still a run on ammunition
Hmm.
at certain points in time, and certainly in the last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people, have been struggling to find various types of ammo. So, what's up, Gerald Wilson?
Yeah.
Quintus George, what's going on?
Welcome. Yeah.
Welcome,
Yeah.
welcome.
And Rella says, in the beginning of our marriage, it was a no, but
Mm-hmm.
now I'm for it. We are actually registered for a pistol training class and will purchase guns afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think that what we're seeing is, I mean, it varies
Mm-hmm.
person to person, couple to couple.
Yep.
And what we're talking about tonight is a couple of things. So, gun ownership in general,
Yep.
but do you agree? Do you and your spouse agree on owning
Mm-hmm.
guns?
And do you
Um,
do you need to agree?
do you need to agree? And then, you said you were kind of inspired by the post that you saw.
Yeah.
If you have children, do you take it so far as to then train your children
Yeah.
and familiarize them so that they're comfortable with handling weapons?
Right.
So those are the things that we're talking about tonight. Hey, Lynn Lou Williams,
What's
glad
up?
you could join us.
Yeah.
I'm always glad to get some love from DC.
Yeah.
So in terms of whether or not we own guns,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are we talking about that?
We can.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
we do. There it is. Check the box on that. What's the next question?
I know. So here's the thing, and often is the case, especially down here in the South, I've found, and in the Midwest, oftentimes gun ownership, gun use, and the reason for gun ownership is passed down through families.
Mm-hmm.
It is, whether the family has a history or a tendency to hunt or for sport or whatever else, is
Mm-hmm.
passed down through families. So my father, when he before he passed away, willed a couple of items. So there was a car, there were some other things, and then there was his gun.
Mm-hmm.
And so my sister got the car, and I got the gun. So
Yeah.
there it is.
And he's not from down here, by the way.
No, he's not from
So
down here.
yeah, but see, so the difference a lot of times, and I don't want to like promote any stereotypes or anything like that.
Mhm.
But Wendy's father owned what, like 2 guns, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 2.
Yeah.
Cats down here is like a whole, a mini
A cache.
arsenal, a cache, if you will. I mean, even yeah. But even some folks in our family are pretty well armed. But there are people who have like dozens of guns, tens of thousands of rounds of ammunition,
That's true.
right? And so, yeah, what's passed down, tends to be a little different based on kind of where you come from and what the thought is around owning weapons. You know, and the why you own weapons in terms of that agreement, right? What's the whole point? Is it about self-defense? Is it about sport? Is it about hunting? Is it about defending yourself in case it really goes down?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so the reasons people own weapons tends to vary. A lot of times, they'll train up their kids and actually get them weapons because they want them to be able to defend themselves. And so depend where you live, it just kind of depends, right? And the laws in your particular state will often drive what the habits are around gun ownership. Like Georgia, open carry state. So unless it's posted that you can't, and there's certain places that you can't go, the courthouse, churches, things like that, you can't carry guns. But for the most part, I mean, it's nothing to see somebody strolling through Walmart or Home Depot or whatever, Publix, with their firearm.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah. So but I'm kind of dipping into another area. The question is, do you need to agree? Do you agree and do you need to?
Yeah. So I guess the first question is, do you agree? So Rella shared with us that initially the idea or her position was no, but now they've come to a different place. Now they agree and they're being trained. They're getting training. Yep. So that's the first question. Do you agree? Right? Do you and your spouse both agree on gun ownership? So Tara Carroll, thanks for joining us. We've been missing you. Internice Hearns, welcome back. Glad you could drop in again. So do you and your spouse agree on whether or not to own guns? That's the first question. Yeah. So we want to hear from you. In the meantime, I'm battling my.
Are you? Is it hot under there or what's happening?
It's not hot.
What is it trying to come off?
It makes my.
Oh, it's starting to like
it's
ride back. Let
It
it ride, baby.
fall
Let it
off.
ride. Whatever
Let it
happens,
fall
happens.
off.
We can handle it.
Yeah.
So yeah, do you agree? I mean, I think we never really had a conversation necessarily about if we agree or not. I think we made some assumptions just kind of based on our.
Yeah, I mean, based on the history. So here's what's interesting. And we're not asking you to disclose whether or not you own weapons. That's not really what we're trying to do tonight, but we just want to know whether or not the two of you agree on the ownership of weapons, if you own them or if you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know, I didn't look at statistics based on military couples. Having a military background, we're trained on firing weapons. And so, that is something that, you knew that it was something that I was familiar with and that I, had qualified and done different things. And so I think maybe it was just an assumption. I don't think we had a discussion, but I actually bought a gun for you.
You sure did. Quite nice, I must say. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that, and by the way, military training, like in the state of Georgia, if you have military training, then you don't have to do a class necessarily if you don't want, and you can get a concealed carry permit just by, showing your ID. In case you didn't know, but you probably knew. if you qualify, you probably knew. But yeah, we certainly, with that military component, that there's at least some level of familiarity. Have probably, definitely shot, qualified, probably disassembled a weapon, things like that, clean one. No?
Yeah. I said I know.
Oh, I was about to say, what? I thought.
Taking me back.
Yeah, but I think that's, and so that becomes a thing where, okay, you're not concerned about whether or not you're going to be fearful of the weapon. Then it just becomes like, do you want it in the house or not? And if it's going to be in the house, what do you do?
Yes.
Then how do you manage that?
Yeah.
And so most people I'm seeing, they agree on whatever that agreement is. Dinner and Jamie Kelly. All right. Yeah. So yeah, right.
Yeah.
Dinner and shooting range is a date night for us. That's funny. So that's funny. Quick story. I was at an event, about this event I went to, like way out in the middle of who knows where, with a group of guys from there was this church we were invited to. A partner of mine was speaking, and they invited us to this event, and it was like basically you shoot, and eat and get a word. That was kind of the setup. And man, oh my, like there's some things out there. That's what weapons people have. You're like, wow, like is this legit? Can we really shoot that?
A cannon.
Right. But I was that night I was that day I was shooting, and it was actually the first time using the weapon you gave me, that handgun. And I was like, I was like off, like just consistently off. And I was like, well, hey, if anybody's standing to that dude's left, he's in he's in trouble. Oh, that was funny. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things. I think that just like owning a motorcycle, for example, that you should have some type of formal training, some familiarization, so that not only how to use it, how to clean it, how to disassemble it, how to store it properly. I mean, all of those things, not necessarily a requirement, but I think highly encouraged and recommended. You ran down a quick list earlier, and you almost hit kind of the top 5 reasons why people own guns, or why Guns and Ammo says you should own a gun specifically.
Okay.
And so most people, according to them and surveys and statistics, most people will say that one of the primary reasons is for protection. What?
Don't move. Don't just
it's
keep
for
talking.
Protection. What's that?
I don't know. Keep talking. Just keep going.
No, I can't.
Okay,
for protection. So for personal and self-defense, or personal and home defense.
Yes.
That's one of the number one reasons. Another is exercising your rights. So it's in the Second Amendment that you have a right to bear arms. And so it's kind of like, hey, that's part of being American.
Yep.
According to a lot of our friends.
And by the way, people, if you read the Constitution, that's really about having a well prepared, equipped militia or something to that effect.
Yeah, but
I'm just saying,
each individual has a right.
I know.
And so it's exercising your rights. And then you mentioned hunting, and then there's recreational activities, lots of competitions. There are competitions for firing. There's like skeet shooting. So there's firing the weapon. There is assembling, disassembling, how fast you can draw a weapon, all of these different things.
Yeah, I'm good at all that.
And then some people just collect guns as a hobby. So those are kind of the top 5 reasons. There's also 4 reasons why you shouldn't own a gun. Okay. And we could get into those too a little bit later. So thank you guys for dropping in there that you agree. So our first question was, do you agree? And then you came up with the next question, and it was, do you need to?
Do you need to?
Okay, so say more.
Well, I don't know. I mean, do you need to? Maybe I want to own weapons, and you're like, no, I'm not comfortable with that. Don't want to do it. What then? Right? Is it, what? Okay, fine. You don't have to own them. You don't have to shoot them. I'm gonna go ahead and do what I got to do. Lock this thing up over here, or whatever it is you do. All right. Do you move forward with that despite disagreement in the house
or discomfort? That's a good one.
So Quinn, I'm assuming that yes is yes. You need to agree, and just make sure I'm getting that right before we run with that.
Yep.
But yeah. So I mean, do you need to agree? And if you believe that you don't, I really want to hear from you.
Yeah. Okay. So do you agree, or do you need to? And then the final one was, if you have children, do you then train your children?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So we want to hear from you guys. So if you're just joining us with Mike and Wendy, we're in the Marriage Shop, and you already know that because you're here. If you think someone else could benefit from what we're sharing, go ahead and tag them or drag them in to join the conversation. So tonight we're talking about gun ownership and that conversation in a marriage, right? And so the first question was, do you agree on owning guns? And then the second question is, do you need to? And then the last one we're going to talk about is bringing the kids into the fold.
Yeah. And so I've been, a number of places on my travels, and I'll simply say I've met couples who were in stark disagreement on this idea of owning guns.
Okay.
And so for some people, it's just a thing. It's a tension that they carry. They just roll with it. Others, some decisions are made despite any type of disagreement or whatever. And there are times when the decision has resulted in somewhat of a tragedy, right? When there was disagreement in the house. And I think that's kind of that worst case scenario. Like whoever is in disagreement is saying, nah, these things can happen. Somebody's saying no, but we need this for whatever reason. And then something happens. And all of a sudden, now, there potentially is there's resentment, and there's now more tension, not based on what happened, but based on that, the idea, hey, I told you, I said X, Y, and Z. And so if there's not agreement, there can be significant problems.
Yeah, and I think that's true for almost anything, right? In a marriage, on any topic or issue that you disagree, and you are solidly on two different sides of it. If something then occurs that involves that issue, or as a result of the issue, or whatever, then it becomes a deeper issue. And there's a lot of blame. There's a lot of "I told you so." There's a whole lot, potentially resentment.
Yeah.
It could cause a real rift in a marriage. And so gun ownership just happens to also be one of those things, I think, among a number of topics.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah. And so many of you, I said, we kind of get into reasons why you shouldn't. And so many of you have seen stories about accidents that occur in the home, particularly when guns are not secured properly. And so, you never want to read about a child that's accidentally shot another child or themselves, or injured someone because they got hold of a gun that was left unattended or not secured. And so generally, at least I've heard that that's the biggest argument. I don't want someone to get it. I don't want an accident in the home. I don't want you to accidentally shoot somebody unintentionally. You heard stories about people believing there were intruders in the home or whatever, and end up shooting a family member. I mean, all of those things. Although the numbers would suggest that they happen rarely, when they do happen, it gets a lot of
Tragic.
A lot of publicity and press because it is tragic.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's all kind of things that you probably what you might consider good, safe practices in the home when the family's there. Like, because right now, if something is rustling in the back room, no questions, zero questions. And nest is empty, right? The dogs are right here. Wendy, right there. Okay. Anybody else? I'm sorry. And so, but when there are people in the house, that's a valid concern. And as some of you all know, or may know, part of my job used to be back in the day responding to crisis in one of my military units, suicide in particular. And so there's a family that they had a son who he was a teenager. I think he was maybe 10th grade or so, right? Maybe in that age range. But there was disagreement, and ultimately, but they did all the most of the right things, I would say, maybe all the right things, right? Yeah. Training, all these things. But the problem becomes you don't know what might happen, right? So, and on a gun, particularly if it's for self-defense, it's a very interesting conundrum, if you will, right? Because there are safe ways to store it, but those ways also delay your ability to actually use it if there's an emergency. So, but if you want speed, then you sacrifice safety sometimes, right? And if the whole family is going to be in on the act, and it's everybody needs to understand how to access this, well, then you kind of introduce other variables, right? Because you have to have a high level of trust that child is not going to use that gun for some purposes that's going to hurt themselves or somebody else, right? And so you got to really kind of understand what's going on. But there are cases when the worst happens or has happened, right? And so that just completely tears a couple apart, because if we're in disagreement and then the worst happens, we don't even have, hey, we made a decision and we understood the risk. Right. We don't have that. It's really important to be able to have that, whatever your decision is, it's important to be able to say, hey, you know what, we understood, right, what this is, and we were together, and we really try to work together to mitigate the risk and to make this, the safest, most reasonable thing possible.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that Rel said that when she was initially a no, her husband waited until she was comfortable before kind of moving forward with purchasing. And now she even feels that her daughter, their adult daughter, should also be trained in
Mm-hmm.
the use of a weapon. And so there's an evolution,
Mm-hmm.
and you bring up a good point because there are some couples that really struggle with this.
Yeah.
And we'll go so far as to say, okay, well, if you insist on owning a weapon, then you can own it, but it can't come in my house.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I've heard that from.
yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard that too. The other thing is, for in the top four reasons why you shouldn't own a weapon, and you hit on one of them, is that the use of a gun in suicide is one of the most lethal means
Mm-hmm.
of committing suicide. That's one. And then also, I mentioned that a child, if it's not secured properly, that a child could potentially get it, the risk
Mm-hmm.
that's associated with that. Another is in terms of fear and anxiety related in response to crisis, right? So
Mm-hmm.
impulsive buys. So people will just get them because they are experiencing fear or anxiety, which is what's occurring right now in our nation in
Yeah.
response to a pandemic and social unrest and civil unrest. And so it's this, okay, so now we're just kind of scrambling to do something, and impulsivity can lead to, I won't say recklessness, but it can put people at more risk.
Yeah, because when you do things impulsively,
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking, you haven't prepared to do those things, right? Like Rel said, I mean, they're gonna go, they're doing training, they're kind of doing, they're preparing themselves and setting that up.
Mm-hmm.
Impulse says, I need that now.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out along the way. I'll get on the Google and I'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that can be a problem, because the calm that you need, right, in order to use that firearm, it's the same calm that you need in like the entire process.
Yeah.
You can't because, especially if you have people around you in your home and everything, you just can't, get nervous, oh my goodness, and just start firing, right? And
Right.
so yeah, I think that calm and that reserve and that judgment, um it says a lot in terms of how you get into it, why you buy it, about how you're going to then prepare yourself to use that weapon,
Yeah.
right?
I also found it interesting, according to my research,
Mm-hmm.
that guns are more often stolen than they are used in self defense. And
Oh,
so,
that's
a
true.
reason against, an argument against gun ownership is that only like 0.5% of the time are they actually used in
Mm-hmm.
self defense or in the personal property or self protection, but they're more often stolen.
And
And
you know where they're stolen from?
cars?
Cars.
Just a guess.
Yep. You'd be surprised how many people run around here with weapons in their consoles right now, or under their seats, or in their glove boxes. Or maybe you wouldn't be surprised. Maybe you're those people. Don't tell anybody. I'm just saying. There are a lot of weapons are stolen from cars, unlocked vehicles, no less.
Yeah, that's
It's true.
interesting. Well,
Yeah.
McNeil, thanks for joining us. She said earlier that they're locked and loaded. And she just dropped in. We came into agreement after a conversation about all the women in our house and making sure we have protection.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of along the same lines that we were talking about. The
Mhm.
other thing is increased risk for victims of domestic violence, domestic and family violence.
Mm-hmm.
Another reason against, or an argument against, owning a weapon. And so I kind of wanted to give both sides of it,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it's important that when you are exploring an issue, or you two are on different sides of it, that you really do look at arguments for and against, and try to see the other person's position. We often will say, this is what I think, this is what I feel, and there's nothing that will change it. And when we're unmoving in that, or inflexible, and our opinions and views on and tonight we're talking about gun ownership. It doesn't allow room for growth or compromise,
Mhm.
and I think in marriage it's really important to be able to hear each other out even when you don't agree.
Critically important, and because things like this are going to eventually, they'll trickle down to the, hey, do we do it or do we not do it, and then there'll be the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we train them or do we not? So
Yeah.
because if I force the issue, I'm gonna get this weapon, well then I'm probably gonna be thinking too, and my kids need to be trained up too. So now we're that divide potentially deepens, because if my wife is saying, yeah, I don't know about that, right? And I'm like, nah, yeah. And she's like, no, I don't, not yet. And I'm like, no, now. And now I bring the kids in. So now we're creating more of a divisive type environment and situation. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why that initial agreement about whatever way it's going to go is very important in
Yeah.
talking about that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's a fair question. Do you prepare the kids or not? And that's one that I've grappled with for a long time. Right thing, now, not now, not ever. Because and is it about comfort around firearms, or is it about equipping them? Because they're going to be out there. Now Morgan's in New York. She's not carrying no firearm. Believe that, because New York is not really having it like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
as they're out and about, though, I mean, what do you do?
Yeah.
What is the right thing to do? And it's always a fair. This is the merit shot, right? And so we're all about what God is saying. What
Mm-hmm.
is what does the Bible have to say on owning weapons, right? Because you could look at um, the scripture where Jesus is the night he's arrested, right? Peter cuts off the ear
Mm-hmm.
of that
And he
soldier.
had a knife.
Hmm?
He had a
It was
knife.
a sword. He
Oh,
like
a
cut
sword.
his.
Oh.
I mean, that was basically that was your gat of the day. Yeah, firearm. Anyway, so that that in Matthew it talks about he cuts
Mm-hmm.
dude's ear off, and Jesus basically told him, no, stop.
Mm.
But that's the scripture where he says, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, what does this mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are also other scriptures all through the Bible that speak to being prepared for battle, right, and being equipped. So what do you do? Or and there's scripture about letting God fight your battles,
Mm.
right? And so is that literal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you just, hey, whatever happens, God's got it? Or do you bring a little of your own insurance?
Yeah.
I think it's an important question to ask yourself. What do you believe in God for? What is some of these scriptures mean to you when the word says the for the weapons of our warfare are not the flesh but have divine power to destroy strongholds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that apply to guns? I don't know, right? But whatever you take from this, 'cause I think I would say, I'll tell you that my summation, and I'm you all may know, I won't give any caveats. I'll just say that my summation is not that the Bible speaks directly against owning weapons, right? In
Mm-hmm.
fact, the Bible talks about being equipped. As Gloria said, be ye also ready.
Also ready.
Right? Yeah, yeah, right. And so, but that word in Matthew, it says he told him to put his sword back in its place. For all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Um, Other versions say live by the sword,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so having a gun, in my opinion, this is totally Mike's opinion, is not living by
Mm.
that. It's not putting my all in that, carrying it everywhere I go, making sure that I'm always at the ready because I got to be prepared to. I don't think it's, at least for us, it's not that. Now, it was recommended to me. I fish a lot. It was
Mm-hmm.
recommended to me, if I'm be out there by myself, maybe you should be ready. I'm like, get out of here. But hey, it's some very interesting people out there on that water, for real.
Well,
So
I mean, the truth is they're very interesting people
I,
who are looking for opportunities everywhere.
that's true.
And so, again, and Gloria, we're glad you're joining us tonight. We miss you. We are not arguing for or against gun ownership,
Hmm.
and we're not trying to convince you either way.
Hmm.
But what we are trying to encourage you to do is to have a conversation about it,
Hmm.
and if you've had a conversation, to have another conversation, because what is known is that right now, at least it feels like more people are buying weapons. And so when it feels like there's a move afoot, that it tends to encourage or inspire people to move.
Hmm.
Yeah. Hey, Brian
What's up,
McNeil.
Brian? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it feels like, I mean, there certainly
There's
the
evidence.
conversations are seeping into places where you haven't seen them seep into before. Say like the marriage shop,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, you're right. Just so super critical,
Hmm.
because this is something that you don't get to do in isolation,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And Quintus George, thank you for bringing that story up. I saw that recently as well. And he's bringing up the story about a couple recently that was shot over shoveling snow. And it says, unfortunately, the couple that was shot over shoveling snow, I believe, is better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Again, you don't know when you're going to come into a situation where there is threat,
Hmm.
or if you are forced to protect yourself. One thing that we know for sure is, I say we know for sure, at least what we've heard and seen, is that when someone does have a weapon and they draw a weapon, that is often used.
I mean, well, yeah, I think we've seen that media
Mm-hmm.
wise, because
Those
once
are the
it's used,
stories
it's
that.
going to,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
it'll make news.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but even that particular incident, think
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
because in order, to be prepared for all these situations, then it sounds like if it's required that you like be armed to go. I'm gonna go shovel some snow.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, that's craziness. You couldn't have told me, like, I don't know, more over a decade ago,
Yeah.
that I would be, armed when I'm fishing to shoot anything more than snakes. But I
Mm.
tell you now, when me and Clarence go down to Florida,
Oh my goodness.
tell you now, it's it's like, but we've discovered that it's probably a really good idea. And so, that's another thing, as we're preparing ourselves, our families, if you're going to do that, it's like, how much preparation, how far do you go?
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna go shovel snow. Let me get let me see, am I gonna wear the side holster, or am I gonna wear it under the shoulder? I mean, that's, to me,
Yeah.
it just kind of blows my mind,
Yeah,
right?
and it's an unfortunate circumstance of current times, and certainly I don't think any of us desires that our neighborhoods become war zones.
Hmm.
And as you quoted some of the scriptures, and as we look at what's played out in the news, it really kind of has this feeling that we are going to battle, that we have to be equipped for
Hmm.
a battle of some sort.
Well, I can tell you now, unless you started a long, long time ago, there are some places where prayer is your best weapon, because, right, your nine is not gonna get it done. I'm just I'm just saying, ain't gonna get it done, right? And so, in that case, you want to hunker, hunker and pray and wait, for real. I mean, that's
All
just real.
right.
So you're right.
So, if you're joining us for the first time in the Marriage Shop, we don't usually have conversations about guns, but tonight we're talking about it because we
Just
want you to talk about it. Whenever there's something that is happening around us, it is necessary for us to talk about it between us. And this is one of those things. And we recognize that you both may not sit on the same side of it, but as many of you shared with us, you are in agreement, and it is important for you to be in agreement. I encourage you that if you're not in agreement, that you have more conversations, ask more questions, and try to see the other person's argument
mhm.
for or against owning a weapon. And so then there is the, well, do we need to say that this is a disclaimer? Probably not, but there is, if you decide or determine that gun ownership is for you, then do all of the requisite things that are required to own a gun so that you can use it properly, store it properly, and use it when necessary,
Mhm.
right? So that it's not just about having it to say that you have it, which we've also seen that a lot of people posting images of having weapons on social media, young people who are enamored with the idea of being strapped in one way or another. And we really have to be careful about the messaging
Mm-hmm.
when we're looking at things like that. So McNeil says, I think you really have to know yourself. If you're a hothead and you have no self-control, that may not be wise. If you're
Mm-hmm.
paranoid and trigger happy, probably not. If you
Mm-hmm.
work in the woods with wild animals doing construction, probably.
Probably, no doubt. In fact, let me give y'all a picture of the hothead with no self control.
Oh my
I went to
goodness.
school with such people time or two, right? The
Yes.
person who's like, I'm mad, I'm going to my trunk. That's that person. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, never. Right? Yeah, right. Yeah. Using a firearm is really it is a weapon of last resort,
Yeah.
right? And so, if there's discomfort in your home, I think it's important to speak to that discomfort and to talk about what you're going to do to mitigate the things, because it's fair to ask, okay, what's the fear about?
Yeah.
Is it just broadly afraid? Well, I mean, there are a lot of things to be potentially afraid of. We hop in those automobiles and we drive off every day, most of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot to be afraid about. But there are things that we've done to mitigate, right? Danger.
Yeah.
There's training, there's seat belts, there's airbags, there's
Licenses.
but
Licenses.
licensing,
Yeah.
yeah, right. There's somebody has sanctioned this activity. There's like, now, and some of y'all who had those really highfalutin vehicles, there's things that control your distance and brake automatically for you, or get ready to brake for you, or tell you there's something in your blind. Do you have to drive at all anymore? I guess you don't. Right? But those are all things that mitigate the potential dangers around driving. And so if you're having some type of disagreement about gun ownership, begin talking about, first of all, where you're both coming from, and speak to the fear, right? That things that would mitigate some of the dangers around gun ownership, and the compromise that's necessary between speed and safety, because there is a compromise. If you have everything locked down, trigger locked, disassembled, ammo over here, weapon over there, in a safe, well, clearly speed is not your objective, right? And so maybe that's more for hunting. But if there's something that you got to get to a little more quickly, well, what do you do then? There's still a lot of things you can do in order to make sure that your environment is safe. There are things you can do to make sure that wherever you store that thing is safe, and maybe that only you can get into it, whether it be combination, biometrics, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that might help to mitigate concerns around safety. Bottom line, though, is if you move forward, or before you move forward, everything, even this, pray on it together.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Yeah, I think that's good, because the other side of this is when weapons need to be taken away or removed from the home.
Mhm.
And, that's also a conversation kind of related to this, maybe in an indirect way. And we've talked about people with challenges with mental health, for example, whether it's they're clinically depressed or bipolar or different circumstances.
Mhm.
Really have honest and open conversations
Yeah.
about, if someone says, I'm really depressed right now, or if someone says that they have suicidal ideation,
Mhm.
then you need to listen. I mean, you need to believe them.
Yeah.
And then that requires that you change some things or you do something differently if you have
Mhm.
weapons in the home. And
Yeah.
that goes back to you talking about kind of balancing the risk with speed and access. I mean,
Mhm.
having access and real concerns, dementia and Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
If, oh, what?
Nothing. You
Go
just
ahead.
hit a button.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, people, if you have particularly like aging parents with guns, and they are beginning, if there's like cognitive decline involved, it is really important to secure the weapon. And it doesn't matter. It's very interesting to watch how people fall into the dynamics that they've had their whole life. If your parent is saying, they're barking orders and you're like, okay, and you're backing off.
Mhm.
There are times when you don't follow those instructions, and that's one of those. And so it gets very touchy because it becomes about people's autonomy and their ability to make decisions, what have you. Safety should be the top priority, because a weapon in the hands of someone who has lost their ability to safely and effectively use that becomes a danger to themselves and everyone around them. And so that kind of has to take priority. And so, yeah, some people, even some of y'all know what I'm talking about. And unfortunately, some of you will experience some things like that, but really important when, and you mentioned firearms, firearms, number one thing used for self-harm, suicide attempts in men, number one thing, right? And so if suicidal ideation becomes a thing, you don't even, it is imperative to remove weapons simply because, or whatever, but we're talking weapons tonight, but if it's pills, if it's anything things that are dangerous, why? Because oftentimes that immediate access is the thing that makes the difference, or should I say lack of immediate access is the thing that makes a difference in a moment, when a moment is what you need in order for someone to do something different, or for help to reach them, or for them to be able to sit and ponder and reach out or whatever. A lot of times the removing the access to whatever that thing is the number one thing you do first, period. Right. Yep. So so that's the thing.
And because there was a story recently, also made me think about it. A 95-year-old man in an assisted living community who had weapons and shot, injured a couple of people and killed one person because he believed that someone had been stealing money from him for some time. And when they investigated, of course, they found no evidence of that. And it just brings about a sad and unfortunate situation, but that is reality. Yeah. So we can't just talk about all of the good and then not talk about any of the risk and talk about a little bit of the bad. The whole point is to have open conversations and look at both sides. Yeah. Do your research and get training. So
even when uncomfortable.
Yes. So Brian McNeil says, yes, talking about it is an absolute. Children were the reason for no, and I agree, but they are either gone or a lot older now. Yeah. So might be time to revisit the conversation.
Well, check out Lisa's.
Yeah, and then Lisa says, I agree with Brian. The kids are older now, and I feel the need to get up over this fear I have of guns. I don't want the kids to have that same fear. Thank you for sharing that and being honest and open about that. And we encourage you to sit down and have a new conversation about it.
Yeah, because but what they just laid out, that's kind of this that tension that exists a lot of times, and a little bit of the irony actually, right? Because one of the best ways to alleviate fear of something like weapons is exposure. Right, understanding how things work, how they don't work, what to do. I was at and being knowing what to do. Actually, I think it equips you, and sometimes to make sure that other people around you are being safe. Because we're at a yard sale, or no, it was a state sale or something.
Oh yeah, remember that estate sale.
There's a guy. They had these guns laid out on a table, and this dude walks up and he just starts. He's like. He's like pulling the trigger and looking at it and pointing it all around. And I like literally grabbed him. I'm like, dude, put that down. I said, stop pointing that gun at people. Oh, it's not loaded. I said, is this your gun? Did you put it on this table? Yeah. And so I started kind of escalating because
you did.
I've been in some situations where it could have gone really bad.
Yeah.
And people pick up things, weapon, you just don't know. Right. And so your kids need to know things like that. Like, you don't know what's in that weapon until you clear it. Right. And like if somebody around you is being unsafe, you can tackle them and be fully within your rights. The police will just they will shake your hand and tell you to have a nice day.
Yeah, well, I mean, right? I read another story recently of a young man, a young boy who purchased an old grenade. Remember, I shared that with you, a World War II grenade at an antique place, and it was actually turned out to be live, and blew up and critically injured him. And some people that were with him, and in the whole idea, the people that owned it, the people that sold it, everyone thought and assumed that it was not active. You just don't know. I mean, you have to be sure.
You have to be sure. I don't even assume it may sound weird to you, but even my own weapons, I don't assume that they are not. I mean, I have like a process. There are very few things that I do that are just rote. but that's one of them. Like every single time, clear it, look in it, make sure,
It's true. A couple of
taking it
times.
out, putting it in, because that's, to me, that ensures that if somebody else makes a mistake, I've kind of done my due diligence, right? And so you alleviate tragedy,
Yeah.
right?
And then the last thing I'll say is if you went and had training a long time ago, before I lose my whole
Man,
my headgear,
now
it's just
you
migrating back.
got to just,
But
let
if
it
you
be.
had training a long time ago and you became familiar with different weapons, but you own something different now, it is just like everything else. As we age and mature and things change, it is necessary to continue to get training, to go back and train again. I would say, okay, yeah, I fired an M16 and I fired 9 millimeters, but I'm not gonna today say, oh yeah, I mean, I could, I know I could go out here and just hit that just based on training that I had over 20 years ago. It requires that we stay current, stay trained, and adjust to whatever our new limitations and parameters are.
That's funny.
Your eyesight may have
You said
changed.
M16. Did you have a flute, by the way, that you played while y'all marched down the
That's what I had. You're terrible. Anyway, safety always first. Thank you for that, Trinice. And thank you guys for joining us tonight. That's all we have to say tonight.
Yeah.
We're Mike and Wendy. We're in the marriage shop. We thought we'd talk about something a little different tonight, and we appreciate everything that you all shared with us. If nothing else, talk to each other and have another conversation about gun ownership, gun usage, and whether or not you should train your kids.
No doubt. Let's pray.
All right.
Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight just thanking you, as always, for just being such an amazingly good God to us. I thank you for your grace every day, your mercy. Thank you for life, health, strength. We ask that you just bless every couple here, every couple that will hear this. Be with them in everything they do. Help them to come together to make the challenging decisions that married couples have to make, God, and help them to be in agreement, God, on one accord in everything that they do. And we just ask you bless them, bless their marriages, bless their families, bless their homes, everything they put their mind, their effort, their hands to. We ask you to be with them. We just thank you for them and all that they mean to us. And we just ask you to continue to help us to do things and everything that we do that be pleasing in your sight. So we thank you. We love you. We trust you with everything. We pray these and other blessings in your name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, y'all. That's it. Y'all have a great week. Stay warm. Stay dry.
Bye.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's your boy JC. I'm in the mood. Love. Yeah. Lately I've been constantly thinking about you, babe. You drive me crazy. Yeah. And girl, I want this. Got me all up in my feelings. Over the feeling, yeah. I knew the first time I laid eyes on you that you would be here forever. I'm not being arrogant, and I still can't take my eyes off you. 'Cause you made me better, so much better. I'm in the mood to love you for a lifetime. I'm in the mood to love you for a lifetime, baby. I love your kindness, I love your confidence. Ooh, you're the finest. So glad you're mine, yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't wanna be with nobody else. Give me your love, that's all the wealth I need. Baby, you're priceless to me, yeah. Promise I'ma be around. I'ma always hold you down. Won't you come and hold me now? Won't you come and hold me now? I just got a new coupe. Yeah, I know I got a roof, but I always keep it down with you. Yeah, and I know they see, girl, you're my queen. And beauty speaks for itself, loud and clear. Yeah, so throw it in the air. It's the sweetest sound to follow my ear. And I want the world to know I'll love you forever. And that's a long time, babe. But I got time for you, baby. I'm in the mood. Ooh, I love you. For a lifetime. I'm in the mood to love you, yeah. For a lifetime, baby. Ooh, yeah. For a lifetime. Oh, for a lifetime. Yeah, yeah.